The research base was colder than a penguin's backside, which was only slightly more hospitable than the embrace of Dr. Sylvain Harker's personality. She was sitting in her command chair, which was more of a second-hand office chair with aspirations of grandeur, peering at the array of screens displaying data that only a masochist could love. "You know what's worse than finding out your ex just got engaged?" she asked the room, filled with tech that blinked and beeped like it was having an existential crisis. Nobody volunteered an answer. Not surprising, since the only people around were her team, and they were all too busy pretending to be busy. "Finding out there might be parallel universes where you're still dating them," she added with a smirk. Dr. Harker had that special kind of charisma that made people wish they were on the other side of the galaxy. Her research team, a motley crew of misfits and nerds, had been coerced into this frozen purgatory by promises of cutting-edge science and, more importantly, lack of any other job offers. Carter, the guy you'd want in your corner during a bar fight if only because his incessant chatter would distract the bouncer, spat out a laugh. "But hey, maybe there's a universe where pineapple on pizza actually works. Or one where you shut up for 5 minutes, snapped Mira, the team's engineer, who had a perpetual look like someone just told her Christmas was canceled. Amidst the banter, the screens began displaying something more interesting than Carter's dating life, a bizarre ripple of energy. It was the sort of thing that would make a physicist's heart skip a beat, assuming they had one left after years of academia. "Either we just discovered a new way to microwave a burrito, or that's something worth looking into," Harker said, leaning closer to the screen. The ripple became a shimmer like the air above a toaster, except this toaster was threatening to upend the laws of physics, or at least what they thought were the laws. The shimmer stretched, twisted, and then, because reality has a sense of humor too, it snapped open, revealing a portal. Because of course it did. "Well, that's new," murmured Jonas, the lab's resident defeatist. "I always said screwing with the fabric of reality was a bad idea." Harker rolled her eyes. "Jonas, everything's a bad idea if you look at it from the right angle, or in your case, any angle." Through the portal, they saw a world not too different from theirs, if theirs had been designed by someone with a fondness for dystopian chic. Skyscrapers jutted from the ground like forgotten teeth, and the sky was an unsettling shade of bruised plum. "This could be one of those worlds where everyone's a genius," Carter suggested hopefully. "Or where people actually use their turn signals. Or it's a world where aliens have enslaved humanity as pets," Harker countered, nodding towards the screen. Indeed, amidst the wreckage, figures were visible. Humans or something very close. But these weren't your average, well-adjusted individuals. They were shackled, led by towering reptilian creatures with the kind of look that suggested they ate sarcasm for breakfast and still had room for a side of despair. "Well, that's," Mira hesitated, searching for a phrase that epitomized the sheer absurdity and horror of what they were witnessing. "Predictable." "Yeah," Harker agreed, a twisted smile tugging at her lips. "But the good news is we might finally have a chance to use that emergency contingency plan," Carter snorted. "You mean the every man for himself plan?" Harker didn't bother to correct him. Emergency plans, in their experience, were best served with a dash of running and a sprinkle of chaos. "All right," she said, her tone shifting from sarcastic to something dangerously close to leadership. "We need to document everything. Mira, see if you can get any readings on what's powering that portal. Jonas, prepare the contingency package." "Carter, stop pretending you're useful and actually do something useful," Carter shrugged. "I could make coffee, or you could monitor those readings," Harker shot back, her patience wearing thin. "Fine," Carter muttered, sauntering over to a console that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated user-friendliness. As they worked, a creeping sense of unease settled over the team. It wasn't just the sight of enslaved humans that got under their skin. It was the knowledge that their little peek through the cosmic keyhole might have let something peek back. "It's like staring into the abyss," Jonas commented gloomily, Except the abyss actually has something interesting to say. Yeah, Mira added, her fingers dancing over controls with the precision of a caffeinated spider. And I'm betting it's saying let's have them for dinner. The portal flickered, its edges shimmering like the world's worst disco ball. Harker glanced at the readings. They were off the charts, not that anyone was entirely sure what chart they were supposed to be on in the first place. Okay, this might be bad, Harker conceded, her voice tinged with a reluctant note of concern. Might be, Jonas echoed, incredulous. You're the optimist around here, aren't you? A sudden, sharp alarm sliced through the room, the kind that made you reach for an aspirin or a quick escape plan. Incoming transmission, Mira said, her eyes wide. The screen blinked, the image of the dystopian landscape replaced with the mug of something that definitely wasn't human. It had too many teeth and eyes that screamed, "I'd love to make you my next meal." The creature spoke, its voice a guttural purr that made skin crawl. "Greetings, humans of Universe 749, it began. We are the Vakesh. Prepare for integration." Integration, Carter repeated. I don't like the sound of that. Harker raised an eyebrow. I'm sure they mean assimilate peacefully with our culture. And if by peacefully you mean violently and without consent, Mira added dryly. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the room steeped in silence that was quickly filled by the anxious murmuring of machinery. Well, that's a first, Jonas said with the air of someone who just watched a train wreck in slow motion. First time we've been threatened by something that's not the department budget. Harker took a deep breath, the kind that suggested she was either about to say something profound or explode. All right, team, new plan. We close that bloody portal and we do it fast. Carter sighed, tapping away at his console. You know, I always thought our first contact would be with little green men, not whatever that was. Little green men would have been preferable, Harker replied. At least they might have brought some beer. As they worked frantically to shut down the portal, the room became a hive of frantic activity, the air crackling with tension and the occasional muttered curse. If we blow a fuse, the last thing I'll see is your ugly mugs, Mira grumbled, her focus locked on the control panel. You'll be lucky, Jonas replied. I'll be stuck with your face tattooed on my retinas. Harker glanced at them, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth despite the circumstances. I'm touched by all this camaraderie, but can we save the love fest until after we're not about to be invaded? With a final, desperate push, the portal began to shrink, its edges collapsing in on themselves with the urgency of a bad decision at a bachelor party. The image of the enslaved humans faded, replaced by the comforting banality of Arctic whiteout. And that, folks, is how you turn off a universe-sized problem, Harker declared, her voice a mix of exhaustion and triumph. For now, Jonas said, his tone implying that the universe was bound to drop another catastrophe in their lap sooner rather than later. As the team caught their breath, the silence was broken only by the soft hum of equipment and the faint, lingering sense of dread. Well, Carter said, leaning back in his chair, that was fun. What's next, boss? Open a portal to a dimension where everyone's a nudist, Harker chuckled, shaking her head. One disaster at a time, Carter. One disaster at a time. The portal, now reduced to a harmless flicker, seemed to be the least of their worries. Doctor. Sylvain Harker, with her usual mix of authority and irritation, was keenly aware of the quiet before what she suspected would be a very loud storm. Right, folks, she said, hands on hips as though she was about to scold a classroom full of unruly children. Let's not start the victory parade just yet. We've got a whole new problem, and this one's likely to bite. Like my ex, Carter muttered, still tinkering with his console as though it might dispense wisdom instead of the usual stream of cryptic data. Your exes aren't the only ones with teeth, snapped Mira, not taking her eyes off the equipment. We've just had a bunch of interdimensional lizards threaten to add us to their padding zoo. Let's focus on that. As if on cue, the portal flared back to life. But this time, instead of showing a dystopian landscape, it spat out a handful of Vakesh soldiers. They were as charming as a hangover on a Monday morning, tall, reptilian, and decidedly not here to discuss the weather. "Welcome to Earth," Carter quipped, raising his hand slowly. Population screwed. General Virixal, the leader of this scaly ensemble, stepped forward, his eyes assessing the room with a mix of curiosity and contempt. "Greetings, humans," he hissed, the voice like nails on a chalkboard. "Prepare for integration." "Integration," Jonas repeated, shaking his head. "I've had sandwiches that were more integrative than this." "Quiet," Harker commanded, more for her team than the aliens. She switched to her best diplomatic tone, the kind usually reserved for department meetings. "General Virixal, I presume. What an unexpected visit." The general's smile was the kind that suggested he'd rather be eating them than talking. "Your universe intrigues us. It will make a fine addition to our empire." "Yeah, well, I've heard our real estate market is booming," Mira quipped, fingers twitching at her sides, readying for what she hoped wouldn't be a fistfight with intergalactic consequences. "Your attempts at humor are noted," Virixal replied, his tail flicking with irritation. "But we are here for more. Practical purposes. Practical like kidnapping," Jonas chimed in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or maybe you just want to borrow some sugar," Carter added, because sarcasm was his default setting. Virixal's gaze settled on Carter, a look of mild amusement playing across his reptilian features. "You will make an interesting specimen," he sneered, turning away as though already bored. "Doctor." Harker, ever the pragmatist, decided it was time to act before their new friends decided to redecorate with their skulls. "Right," she said briskly. "What do you want, Virixal? Because if it's an all-you-can-eat human buffet, I'm afraid we're fresh out." Virixal's eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance passing over his features. "Your planet's resources. Your people. All of it will be assimilated." "Assimilated," Mira repeated, rolling her eyes. "Do you have a brochure? Maybe something with nice pictures?" Ignoring her, Virixal signaled his soldiers, who promptly began herding the team like cattle. "Prepare them for transport," he ordered, his tone dismissive. "Transport," Carter said, raising an eyebrow. "I didn't even pack my toothbrush." Harker, seeing no other option, decided it was time for some good old-fashioned improvisation, or, as she liked to call it, winging it with style. "All right, team," she said under her breath. "Let's show these bastards what we're made of." "Mostly caffeine and poor life choices," Jonas replied, but his eyes were focused, ready for whatever chaos was about to ensue. As if sensing the impending insubordination, one of the Vakesh turned, its weapon raised, a cruel-looking device that suggested its creator had some serious anger issues. "Do not resist," it hissed, aiming squarely at Harker. "Oh, but resisting is what we do best," she shot back, a wicked grin spreading across her face. With the grace of someone who has spent too much time dodging metaphorical bullets, Harker lunged forward, grabbing a nearby tool, a wrench, big enough to make a statement but not so big as to be cumbersome. It wasn't a weapon, but it'd do in a pinch. The room erupted into action. Mira, channeling her inner mad scientist, began tinkering with the base's power controls. Sparks flew as she pulled wires with abandon, her face alight with the thrill of immediate danger. "If I blow us all up, at least we won't be lizard food," she yelled over the chaos. Carter, meanwhile, was proving that his mouth wasn't his only asset. He ducked and weaved through the fray, grabbing anything not bolted down and flinging it at their would-be captors. "Catch," he shouted, tossing a particularly heavy-looking piece of equipment at an unsuspecting Vakesh. Jonas, for his part, found himself grappling with one of the soldiers, his usual pessimism replaced by grim determination. "You know," he grunted, "I was really hoping to die in my sleep. Thanks for ruining that." Even in the midst of mayhem, Harker's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "Keep it together, people. We need to buy Mira time." "Time," Mira shouted back, hands ablur over the controls. "I need a miracle." "Miracles are for the religious," Jonas replied, managing to land a punch that sent a Vakesh sprawling. "We make do with luck and bad attitude." Gradually, the tide began to turn, the Vakesh soldiers finding themselves outmatched not by strength or weapons but by sheer human stubbornness and desperation. It was the kind of battle that would never make the history books but would be sung about in the bars by those who survived. All right, Carter called, ducking under a clumsy swipe. I think they're reconsidering their life choices. Virixal, watching as his squad was systematically out-crazed by a handful of humans, let out a frustrated roar. This is not over, humans. Your world will fall. Yeah, well, take a number, Harker shot back, wrench in hand like a futuristic knight. We've got bigger fish to fry. With the portal still flickering ominously, Mira's frantic rewiring finally paid off. There was a sudden, loud crack, and the portal began to collapse in earnest, dragging the remaining Vakesh back towards their own dimension like a cosmic vacuum cleaner. Get out, Mira shouted, shoving the last of the buttons. I don't know how long it'll hold. The team scrambled for the exit, feet pounding against the cold, metallic floor. Behind them, the portal shrieked and sputtered, its energies swirling into a vortex of light and sound before collapsing into nothingness with a final, defiant pop. Well, Carter said, breathless but exhilarated, that was something indeed, Harker agreed, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. Let's hope they think twice before trying that again. As the team surveyed the now quiet room, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, they couldn't help but laugh, a nervous, relieved sound that echoed through the base. It wasn't over, of course. They knew the Vakesh would be back, and next time they'd come with more than just a recon team. But for now, at least, they'd bought themselves some time. Time to regroup, time to plan, and most importantly, time to figure out just how to make sure their universe stayed theirs. Anyone for coffee? Carter asked, his voice dripping with mock nonchalance. Only if you make it, Mira replied, collapsing into a nearby chair. I'm too wired to move, seconded, Jonas said, rubbing at a bruise forming on his cheek. I think I'll be feeling this in the morning. Harker, ever the leader, couldn't resist a final quip as she surveyed her team, tired, bruised, but unbowed. Well, that's what you get for saving the world. No thanks, no medals, just a hell of a hangover. As they settled into the silence, the weight of what they'd faced and what was yet to come hung over them like the unshakable chill of the Arctic wind. But beneath it all, there was a spark of defiance, a refusal to simply roll over and let the universe have its way with them. Because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was making the best out of a bad situation. Or at the very least going down swinging. So what's the plan? Carter asked, leaning back with a weary grin. Plan, Harker said, her eyes glinting with determination. We're going to give those Vakesh bastards a warm human welcome. After all, they seem to like us so much. And with that, the team settled into the familiar rhythm of preparation, their laughter and banter a shield against the darkness that lurked just beyond their stars. The air still shimmered from the portal's recent collapse, leaving the research base echoing with the hollow aftermath of chaos. Dr. Sylvain Harker surveyed the wreckage, a battlefield of broken tech and bruised egos. It wasn't quite the reception Earth had hoped to offer interdimensional visitors, but it would do for now. I suppose we should send a thank you card, Carter quipped, wiping sweat from his forehead with a sleeve that was more dirt than fabric. Something along the lines of, thanks for dropping by, but next time stay the hell away. Can't exactly email that with our comms down, Mira said, her voice laced with her usual dry wit. She was still at the console, her fingers flicking switches with an agility that suggested she'd been doing this since before she could legally hold a screwdriver. Harker let out a sigh, the kind that spoke volumes about the sort of day she'd been having. Carter, get on fixing the systems. Mira, assist him. We need to get a message out. The last thing we want is another unexpected visit. Or a surprise inspection from the Intergalactic Housing Authority, Jonas added, nursing his sore knuckles like an old friend. Carter nodded, though his expression suggested he thought the task about as appealing as a root canal. Sure, nothing says fun like reverse engineering alien tech with a hangover. Harker's gaze shifted to Finlay Mistral, their resident engineer who had a knack for turning chaos into something resembling order. He was currently examining a piece of alien technology with all the intensity of a cat watching a particularly interesting fly. "And you, Finlay," Harker said, catching his attention. "Think you can make sense of that?" Finlay looked up, eyes gleaming with an enthusiasm that seemed out of place amidst the debris. "Oh, absolutely. This stuff's like a jigsaw puzzle made by someone with a vendetta against logic." "But I think I can make it sing." "Sing?" Jonas interjected, one eyebrow raised skeptically. "Last thing we need is a musical number." "It's a metaphor, Jonas," Finlay replied, not missing a beat. "Though if this thing starts belting show tunes, we're in more trouble than I thought." "Great," Harker muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "Our fate's in the hands of a man who talks to gadgets." Finlay shrugged, more amused than insulted. "Hey, gadgets are better listeners than most people." As the team got to work, the room fell into a tense but familiar rhythm, fingers tapping, tools clinking, the occasional muttered curse filling the silence. Outside, the cold wind howled against the walls, a reminder that they were on a planet that could kill them just as surely as any alien invader. Carter's hands flew over the console, his sarcastic veneer slipping just enough to reveal the grit beneath. "All right, let's see what these scaly bastards have got under the hood." Mira leaned over, offering the kind of support that came with a side of sass. "If you break it, you get to explain it to the interdimensional tech support." "Please hold while I transfer your call," Carter retorted, rolling his eyes. "Hopefully to someone who hasn't tried to kill us." Finlay, meanwhile, had commandeered a corner of the lab, surrounded by a haphazard assembly of alien tech that looked more like modern art than anything functional. He was in his element, hands moving with a confidence that suggested he could rebuild civilization with a box of scraps and a roll of duct tape. "All right, folks," he called out, not looking up. "Here's the sitch. Their tech has got a kind of frequency modulator. Think of it like a universal adapter, only it doesn't speak IKEA instructions." "Perfect," Mira said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "We can finally tune into the interdimensional soap operas." "Ah, the drama of lizard people," Carter added, his focus still on the console. "Their love triangles must be riveting." Harker crossed her arms, her patience wearing thinner than the ice outside. "Can we cut the chatter? How do we use this to our advantage?" Finlay grinned, the kind of grin that suggested he was 2 steps ahead and thoroughly enjoying the view. "We hijack their signal. If we can tweak the modulator to our frequency, we might just piggyback a message through whatever cosmic hellscape they call home." "Like sending an SOS with a side of screw you," Carter surmised, glancing over his shoulder. "Exactly," Finlay replied. "If it works, we might even be able to scramble their systems long enough to get a few more things in our court. Or blow us up," Jonas said, ever the optimist. "That too," Finlay admitted, unperturbed. "But hey, no risk, no reward." Harker nodded, the gears in her mind turning with the intensity of someone who saw the world not as it was but how it could be. "All right, let's do it." Mira, Carter, help Finlay get that thing talking. Jonas, see if you can scrounge up anything we can use as a backup if this goes south. "South," Jonas echoed, rubbing his chin. "I'd say we've already hit rock bottom and started digging." "Then let's dig up," Harker shot back, her tone brooking no argument. "I'm not letting those overgrown geckos make this planet their summer home." With a collective nod, they set to work. The room buzzed with the energy of a crew who'd faced the impossible and decided to give it the finger. There was something almost comforting in the madness, as if daring the universe to try harder. Finlay's hands moved with fluid precision, adjusting dials and rerouting circuits with the ease of someone who'd long since accepted that sanity was optional in his line of work. "Okay, we've got a pulse," he announced, the device humming quietly. "Now we just need to sync it up." "How long?" Harker asked, her eyes never leaving the mess of wires. "Best guess, 10 minutes. Worst case." "We all explode." "Optimistic," Carter muttered, his sarcasm a steady undercurrent. Hey, optimism is just pessimism with better PR, Finlay replied, not missing a beat. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the room grew palpable. Every click, every beep was a reminder that they were dancing on the edge of chaos. But beneath it, there was a current of defiance, a refusal to lay down and let fate have its way with them. Finally, Finlay leaned back with a satisfied nod. All right, we're live, sending the signal now. The room held its collective breath as the device thrummed with energy, a digital heartbeat that carried their hopes and curses across dimensions. It was a gamble, a shot in the dark with nothing but grit and desperation backing it. Let's hope they're not screening their calls, Mira said, her voice a mix of nerves and cynicism. Or that they pick up and realize we're not just a bunch of monkeys with tech, Carter added, his attention fixed on the console as he monitored the transmission. Seconds stretched into eternity as they waited, the silence heavy with anticipation. Then suddenly, a light blinked on the console, a response. Got something, Carter said, adjusting the controls. Looks like they're listening. Harker allowed herself a small smile. Good, let's make sure they hear us loud and clear. The message was simple, a mix of bravado and a plea for help wrapped in a digital package. It was all they had, the last card in a hand that was running out of tricks. All right, Harker said, rolling her shoulders as if preparing for battle. Now we wait. Waiting, Jonas grumbled, my favorite part of a crisis. Hours passed like molasses in winter, every tick of the clock a reminder that they were alone, cut off from the world they were trying so hard to save. Yet in the silence there was something else, a flicker of hope, fragile but defiant. Finally, the console beeped again, a new message flashing on the screen. Looks like we've got a reply, Carter said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Well, what are they saying? Mira asked, leaning in. Carter scanned the message, his eyes widening ever so slightly. They say hold tight, help's on the way. The words hung in the air, impossible, and yet so desperately needed that they felt like a lifeline. Help's on the way, Jonas repeated, a grin breaking through his usual cynicism. I'll believe it when I see it, Harker nodded, her face a mask of determination. It's a start, and right now I'll take any start I can get. As the team absorbed the news, the tension in the room eased, if only slightly. It wasn't a solution, not by a long shot, but it was a step forward. And for a group used to fighting against the odds, that was enough. All right, Harker said, her voice firm. We keep prepping. If they are coming, we need to be ready. Ready for what? Mira asked, ever the pragmatist. For whatever the hell comes next, Harker replied, her eyes glinting with a fire that refused to be extinguished. And with that they turned back to their tasks, the weight of the unknown looming large but not insurmountable. They were just a handful of humans on a frozen rock in the middle of nowhere, but they had something that the Vakesh didn't understand, the will to fight and the refusal to give up. Because if there was one thing Earth had taught them, it was that survival wasn't just about living. It was about laughing in the face of certain doom, flipping the bird to fate and going down swinging every single time. And that they intended to do. The research base felt like a pressure cooker with a broken valve. If the outside universe was a screaming toddler with a penchant for destruction, the inside was the beleaguered parent, just trying not to lose its mind. The portal, which once stood as a testament, damn it, I meant a reminder, to humanity's interdimensional dabbling, was now a throbbing ulcer ready to rupture. Everyone knew it, even if they didn't say it aloud. Dr. Sylvain Harker stood by the central console like a general surveying a battlefield, or maybe just someone trying to remember if they left the oven on. Her steely gaze was fixed on the data sprawled across the screen, numbers and symbols that might as well have been hieroglyphs detailing the end of the world. Looks like we're in for a fun day, Carter quipped, sidling up with the confidence of a man who knew exactly how bad things could get. You know, assuming your idea of fun involves existential terror. I always wanted to ring in the apocalypse with a bang, Mira added, her fingers flying over her own console. Or at least a fizzle and a lot of smoke. And here I thought we were just gonna have a nice day of alien invasions. You know, maybe a picnic, Jonas grumbled, rubbing at his sore knuckles with a grimace. Harker didn't bother with a response because, frankly, she didn't have one. Instead, she focused on the swirling vortex on the screen, the portal's erratic fluctuations making for a real showstopper. "Finlay, how's that alien jigsaw coming along?" Finlay, who was half buried in a tangle of wires and what might have been the alien equivalent of a toaster, looked up with a lopsided grin. "Oh, just trying to stop our little science fair project from going nuclear." "No pressure, right?" "Pressure's just a fancy word for motivation," Harker replied, her voice dripping with the kind of optimism that bordered on masochism. "So let's get motivated." Outside, the Vakesh soldiers were undoubtedly getting antsy. General Virixal, their illustrious leader, was probably still nursing the sting of humanity's cheeky attempt at a cosmic phone call. If they knew about the portal's instability, they'd be as eager as rabid dogs on a meat wagon. "Here's the deal," Carter said, turning his chair with a dramatic spin. "We've got to stabilize the damn thing, or we're going to have a rather explosive end to our day. And I, for one, have way too much on my bucket list to go up in flames." "Yeah, like surviving this mess," Mira added, tapping furiously at her keyboard. "Can we at least pretend there's a plan here?" "There is a plan," Harker said, her voice as sharp as a blade. "Step 1, fix the portal. Step 2, don't die." "Ambitious," Jonas snorted, his sarcasm as thick as the grease on his hands. "But in for a penny, in for a pound." "Or in for a disintegration," Finlay chimed in from his electronic labyrinth. But who's counting? The room was a cacophony of beeps, clanks, and cynical banter, everyone working with the kind of desperate energy that only comes from realizing you're very possibly screwed. It was an orchestra of chaos, each member playing their part in a symphony that could very well end in silence. "Okay, I've got it," Carter said, a triumphant edge to his voice. "We patch into the mainframe, reroute the power through the auxiliary conduits, and hope it doesn't blow us to kingdom come." "Sounds like a plan made by someone who's never met Murphy and his law," Mira fired back, though her fingers never stopped flying over the keys. "Murphy's an optimist," Jonas added, settling into his role as the team's resident pessimist. "I'm betting on a shitstorm of what can go wrong will go wrong." "So, just another Tuesday," Harker said, her gaze unyielding as she fixed it on the portal's fluctuations. It was a beast, a snarling mass of energy that could unravel not just their little corner of the universe, but the whole damn tapestry. "All right, folks," Finlay called out, emerging from his nest of wires with a tool in one hand and a sandwich in the other. "Priorities. I've got the modulator ready to go. We just need to sync it up and pray to whichever gods haven't completely given up on us." "Sync it up how?" Harker asked, though she had a feeling she wouldn't like the answer. "Well, we need to manually adjust the frequency," Finlay admitted, not quite meeting her eyes. "Which means someone needs to, get up close and personal with the portal." "Of course it does," she muttered, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Carter, Mira, you're with me. Jonas, you're on backup. Finlay, keep doing whatever it is you do." "Being brilliant," he replied with a wink, already turning back to his chaotic domain. With barely a moment's hesitation, Harker led the charge toward the portal chamber, her mind a whirlwind of calculations, risks, and the faint hope of survival. The portal loomed like a black hole, a swirling mass of blues and purples that defied the laws of physics and good taste. "Well, here we are," Carter muttered, staring at the monstrosity with equal parts awe and dread. "Face to face with the interdimensional colonic that might just clean us out." "Charming," Mira said, though her voice lacked its usual edge. She was focused, her hands steady as she began the delicate task of syncing the modulator with the portal's erratic pulses. "All right, let's do this," Harker said, her voice a beacon of command in the madness. "Carter, give me those readings. Mira, keep that modulator steady." "On it," Carter replied, his fingers dancing over the control panel with the grace of a pianist at a particularly grim recital. "Readings are stable for now. But I'd keep your fingers crossed." Crossed, prayed, and possibly broken, Jonas added through the comms, his voice laced with the usual blend of dark humor. Just another day in paradise. The portal thrummed beneath their efforts, a beast that seemed to sense the encroaching hands of humanity and didn't much care for the intrusion. It was a dance, a delicate waltz with the devil that could end in triumph or tragedy. "All right, Mira," Harker said, her voice steady. "Hit it." With a nod, Mira flipped the final switch, the modulator whirring to life as it sought to tame the portal's chaos. For a moment, it seemed to work. The portal's erratic pulses slowed, the swirling energies starting to align. And then, as if sensing victory and deciding it wasn't having any of that, the portal bucked like a wild horse, energy crackling outwards in a wave that sent everyone reeling. "What the hell was that?" Carter shouted, struggling to regain his footing as the chamber trembled around them. "Just a little hiccup," Mira replied, though her expression was anything but calm. "We just need to adjust the frequency again." "A hiccup," Jonas barked in disbelief. "That felt more like a full-blown seizure." "Well, we're not dead yet, so that's something," Harker said, latching onto the modulator and adjusting it with a surgeon's precision. "Let's try again." The team regrouped, their movements a testament, damn it, a reminder, to the resilience and stubbornness that had brought them this far. Failure wasn't an option, not with the stakes higher than ever and the odds stacked against them. "All right, Carter," Harker said, her voice unwavering. "On my count, 3, 2, 1, go." This time the portal's resistance was palpable, a living entity that fought their every move. But they persisted, fingers flying over controls, minds sharper than the edge of a knife as they battled to bring order to chaos. And then, by some miracle or sheer bloody-mindedness, the portal began to stabilize, its energies aligning in a way that screamed temporary but would have to do. "We did it," Mira said, her voice a breathless mix of relief and disbelief. "We've stabilized it. For now." "Temporary fix," Carter added, though the grin on his face suggested it was a victory worth celebrating, however brief. "Guess we bought ourselves a bit more time." "Time's all we need," Harker replied, her eyes fixed on the portal with resolve burning brighter than ever. "Let's make sure we use it wisely." The team retreated from the chamber, the portal thrumming with a newfound steadiness that was almost comforting. Almost. It was a reprieve, nothing more, a chance to regroup and reassess before the next storm hit. Because if there was one thing everyone knew, it was that the universe never played fair. But that wouldn't stop them from playing the hand they were dealt, and playing it to win. As they returned to the central command room, the reality of their situation settled over them like a weight. They delayed the inevitable, but the portal's instability was a ticking time bomb, one that could still tear the universe apart if it wasn't disarmed soon. "We need a long-term solution," Harker said, her gaze sweeping the room like a hawk on the hunt. "And we need it yesterday." "Easy," Finlay said, appearing from behind his fortress of alien tech with a mischievous glint in his eye. "Just let me work my magic." "Magic or madness?" Jonas asked, though his usual sarcasm carried a note of admiration. "Why choose?" Finlay replied, already diving back into his work with the fervor of a mad scientist on the brink of a breakthrough. As the team resumed their efforts, the room hummed with determination and the kind of camaraderie forged in the fires of adversity. They were a motley crew of misfits, brilliant and flawed in equal measure but united by a singular purpose, survival. The odds were against them, but they'd faced worse. And if the universe thought it could beat them down, it had another thing coming. Because they'd fight tooth, nail, and whatever improvised weapon they could get their hands on to protect their world, even if it killed them. And that, as Harker would say, was the beauty of humanity. Resilient, relentless, and just stubborn enough to laugh in the face of oblivion. The research base was buzzing with an electric tension that made the air taste like copper and desperation. It was the kind of atmosphere that felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into the unknown depths of doom and thinking, "Hey, maybe I'll jump, Doctor." Sylvain Harker sat slumped in her chair, fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the console. Her eyes darted between the flickering screens, each one blaring bad news like an old tabloid with a vendetta. Outnumbered and under siege, with Vakesh soldiers knocking at their proverbial door, it was shaping up to be one hell of a day. "Anyone else feel like we're the last band playing on a sinking ship?" Jonas muttered, his hands working on a ragtag collection of weapons that looked like they'd been salvaged from a junkyard. "Not that I can play an instrument, but my enthusiasm for self-preservation is unmatched." "Let's just hope you don't hit any wrong notes," Mira quipped, her sarcasm as sharp as a shiv. She pushed her chair back, stretching her arms and cracking her knuckles like she was getting ready for a fight she couldn't win. "We'd hate to go out on a bad tune." Carter let out a snort that was more a grim punctuation mark than a laugh. "If we're lucky, maybe they'll have a taste for musical appreciation and leave us be." Harker could almost feel the weight of their cynicism pressing in around her. It was the kind of oppressive mood that came from realizing that the cavalry wasn't coming, and the only ones left to save them were themselves. A low-grade panic simmered beneath the surface, but Harker was determined not to let it boil over. After all, as the so-called leader, it was her job to keep a stiff upper lip when the universe was trying its damnedest to smack them sideways. Finlay popped up from his labyrinth of wires, resembling more a giddy child with a new toy than a seasoned engineer. His eyes gleamed with a mad scientist's glint, and his hair looked like it had been styled by a particularly rebellious electrical socket. "Good news is, I've managed to coax a bit more power from the alien tech. Bad news. Still not enough to kick the Vakesh back to whatever cosmic rock they crawled out from under." "Great. So we're still buggered, just with more voltage," Carter said dryly, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife through lukewarm butter. "You know, I'm really starting to miss the days when our biggest worry was whether the coffee machine would break," Mira sighed, leaning back in her chair. "And I hate coffee." The room fell silent, each of them lost in thoughts that likely mirrored the same bleak question. How in the hell were they going to get out of this mess? The portal's temporary stabilization felt like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. Sure, it stopped the immediate bleeding, but the underlying problem was still very much there. "All right, folks. Let's focus," Harker commanded, though her voice carried a weariness she couldn't quite hide. "We've got to keep that portal stable and figure out a way to drive off our uninvited guests before they decide to redecorate Earth with our entrails." Jonas gave a humorless chuckle. "You make it sound so easy. Just your basic Saturday morning DIY project, huh?" "Absolutely. Just remember to read the instructions and avoid getting electrocuted," Harker shot back, trying to muster a semblance of confidence. There was a pause, a moment of collective realization that they were well and truly in it deep. They were the underdogs in a fight they hadn't signed up for, and the only weapons they had were their wits, their sarcasm, and a few scrappy pieces of tech held together by hope and maybe some actual duct tape. Suddenly, the base's klaxons shredded the air with a piercing wail, signaling yet another wave of Vakesh forces breaching their defenses. Metal screeched against metal as the ominous thud of boots reverberated through the corridors, each step a countdown to catastrophe. "Looks like our visitors are getting impatient," Carter noted, checking the security feeds. "Hope someone brought the good silverware." "I think they're more the burn-it-to-the-ground type," Jonas replied, readying his makeshift arsenal with grim determination. "Let's give them a warm reception," Harker said, her voice steely despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "And by warm, I mean let's try not to die horribly." "Makes you appreciate the small things," Mira said with a shrug. "Like breathing." They fanned out, each taking up positions that offered varying degrees of I might not die instantly. The corridor leading to the portal chamber was narrow and dimly lit, an advantage or a death trap depending on how you looked at it. But beggars couldn't be choosers, and they were well past the point of choosiness. "Here they come," whispered Finlay, his excitement tempered by the grim reality of their situation. The air was thick with tension as the Vakesh soldiers appeared, their alien forms a blend of armor and organic menace, like someone mixed a suit of medieval plate with a very angry reptile. There was no negotiating with them. They'd made it clear they wanted Earth, and they weren't about to swap it for some nice, real estate on Mars. The first shot rang out, a sizzling bolt of energy that seared the air and narrowly missed Harker's head. "Okay, that was a little close for comfort," she muttered, ducking behind a console that offered scant protection. It was a firefight now, the corridor filled with the flash of energy weapons and the acrid smell of ozone. Mira was a blur of motion, her aim as sharp as her tongue. Each shot counted. "Why do they always aim for the face?" she grumbled, sidestepping a bolt that left a smoking crater where her head had been. "We have faces worth shooting at," Carter replied, his expression masked by concentration as he picked off a soldier with a well-placed shot. Jonas was in his element, the battlefield a canvas for his particular brand of cynical artistry. "So, Harker, any chance you have a miracle stuffed in your back pocket?" he called, ducking behind a support beam as another volley lit up the corridor. "I'm fresh out," Harker shouted back, more occupied with staying alive than crafting optimism. "But if you find one, let me know." The Vakesh were relentless, their assault as unyielding as a tax collector on a mission. Each time one of them went down, another seemed to take its place, a never-ending tide of alien fury intent on claiming victory. Harker's team was holding the line, but it was taking its toll. Every miss, every close call was an erosion of their hope, a reminder of just how stacked the odds were. A particularly vicious exchange left Jonas nursing a burn across his arm, the fabric of his sleeve singed and smoking. "I knew I should have stayed in bed today," he hissed, wincing as he continued to fire. "Would have been a hell of a sick day," Mira replied, her voice tight as she focused on the encroaching threat. "Could have called it a mental health break," Finlay added, though his usual humor was strained under the weight of their predicament. Harker's mind raced, searching for a way to turn the tide, but every idea seemed to crumble under the unforgiving reality of their situation. She was supposed to be the leader, the one with the answers, but right now, all she had were questions and a gnawing sense of futility. "Hold the line," she called out, though the words felt hollow, a platitude in the face of an unstoppable force. The Vakesh pressed on, their numbers seemingly endless, the base's defenses buckling under the strain. It was a losing battle, and though they fought with everything they had, it was hard to shake the feeling that this was it. The end of the line, but giving up wasn't an option. Not when the stakes were this high, not when Earth's future hung in the balance. They were fighting for more than just themselves, and if they were going down, they'd do it swinging. "All right, you bastards," Harker growled, teeth gritted, determination flaring in her eyes. "Let's see what you've got." The corridor erupted into chaos once more, a cacophony of shots and shouts, the air thick with the acrid tang of battle. It was desperate, brutal, and utterly unforgiving. But then, just as the tide seemed certain to overwhelm them, a new sound cut through the din, a low, resonant hum from the direction of the portal. It was a sound that spoke of power, of potential, and for the first time, a flicker of hope reignited in Harker's chest. "Finlay," she shouted over the roar of the fight, her voice carrying a note of urgency and the faintest hint of new hope. "What's happening with the portal?" "I think it likes us," Finlay called back, a wild grin on his face. At least one part of the alien tech had decided to play nice, and it couldn't have come a moment too soon. "Let's see if we can convince it to help," Harker replied, determination hardening into resolve. They were far from safe, but in the face of overwhelming odds, they had no choice but to gamble everything on the slimmest chance of survival. As the battle raged on, each member of the team threw themselves into the fray with renewed vigor, fueled by the desperate hope that they might just pull off the impossible. For a moment, that hope was enough to keep them fighting, enough to keep them believing that maybe, just maybe, they weren't out of the game yet. And for a group of unlikely heroes standing against the dark, that small sliver of hope was all they needed. The Vakesh soldiers were advancing like a tax audit with a grudge, and the odds of surviving this day seemed as slim as a politician's promise. But here they were, a ragtag bunch of humans sticking two fingers up at the universe. Dr. Sylvain Harker watched the chaos unfold from her dubious sanctuary behind an overturned console. Her brain felt like it was doing somersaults in her skull, trying to juggle calculations, probabilities, and the impending doom all at once. If there was a manual for how not to die in an alien invasion, she must have skipped the chapter about retaining sanity under fire. "Mistral," she barked, "give me something good." Finlay Mistral, the resident engineer with the enthusiasm of a caffeinated squirrel and the appearance to match, was elbow-deep in alien tech. His eyes sparkled with the manic glee of someone who'd just found out they were winning the lottery, only to discover they'd accidentally entered a death match. "Actually," he said, half muffled by a tangle of wires, "I've got something. A little flaw in their tech. It seems these Vakesh never heard about updating their firmware. I might be able to use this baby to throw a wrench in their works." "Great," Carter called out, firing off another round. "So we have a chance of not dying immediately. That's slightly better than before." Mira, dodging another energy bolt, snorted. "Only if Finlay doesn't blow us all up first." "That's rich, coming from someone who thinks pissing off an entire alien race is a good idea," Finlay quipped, not looking up from his work. General Virixal led his troops from the back, perhaps thinking it was safer there, or maybe just trying to avoid the stench of human defiance. He was neither amused nor particularly impressed, but his interest was piqued by the continued resistance. What was it about these humans that made them such persistent pests? Jonas, ever the pragmatist, was fashioning a grenade out of spare parts. "Got to hand it to you, Mistral. If you figure this out, drinks are on me. If not, well, I guess I won't need cash where I'm going." "Let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes," Finlay muttered, hands moving like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of chaos. "If I'm right, and I usually am when it comes to breaking things, I can make their tech go haywire." Harker glanced nervously at the portal, which buzzed ominously like a cat about to pounce. "And what's the catch?" "Always a catch," Carter added, ducking a shot that would have left a hell of a mess. "The catch," Finlay said with a grin that suggested he might actually enjoy this, "is that I have to sync our systems with theirs. It could work, or it could create a localized black hole. But hey, no pressure." "No pressure," Harker echoed, her heart thudding like it was auditioning for a horror movie soundtrack. "All right, Mistral, do it." As Finlay dove back into his task with the reckless abandon of someone who mistook danger for a motivational poster, the rest fought like a pack of cornered wolves. Harker couldn't help but admire them. They were in it deep, but by God, if they weren't going to make the Vakesh earn every inch of ground. Carter took a moment during the lull between volleys to catch his breath. "You know," he said, "if we survive this, I'm thinking of taking up a new hobby, like knitting, or maybe synchronized swimming." "Yeah, 'cause nothing says badass like a pair of knitting needles," Mira fired back, rolling her eyes. "The real question," Jonas interjected, "is when did fighting for our lives become a regular Tuesday?" The banter was a lifeline, keeping them tethered to something resembling normalcy even as the alien threat closed in. The walls of the base seemed to hum with an energy of their own. Whether it was the alien tech or just the universe laughing at their plight, no one could say. "Hold them off a little longer," Harker urged, eyes flicking between her team and the encroaching soldiers. "Finlay needs just a few more minutes." "Minutes we might not have," Jonas muttered, eyeing his makeshift grenade like it was his last ace in a rigged game. And then, as if the universe had finally decided to throw them a bone, something happened. The portal, that unpredictable beast, emitted a sound that could only be described as a cat purring through a megaphone. It was softer, almost welcoming, like it was beckoning them towards some kind of resolution, or perhaps a brand new disaster. "Mistral," Harker prompted. Finlay looked up with the expression of someone who just found out they weren't getting fired after all. I think we're in business. Their systems are glitching. It's not perfect, but it should slow them down. Should, Mira said, emphasis dripping with skepticism. That's comforting. With a sudden flash, the alien tech crackled angrily, as if realizing it had been tricked. The Vakesh, momentarily caught off guard, hesitated, a brief pause in the chaos that was as rare as an honest politician. "All right, people," Carter shouted. "Let's make those bastards regret coming here." They pushed back, a surge of adrenaline-fueled bravado sweeping through the team. Shots rang out, determination fueling each strike, each desperate attempt to reclaim their ground. The odds were still stacked higher than a bureaucrat's paperwork, but for the first time they had a glimmer of hope. General Viraxal, sensing the shift, urged his troops forward, their resolve now tinged with frustration. He'd underestimated these humans, but he wasn't about to let it ruin his day. It was a matter of pride now, and if there was one thing the Vakesh couldn't stand, it was losing face. Harker, feeling the weight of leadership heavy on her shoulders, knew they had to capitalize on this brief advantage. "Push them back," she yelled, the words ringing with a newfound authority. "We can do this." Finlay continued to manipulate the alien tech, his fingers dancing over controls with the grace of a drunk ballerina. Each adjustment sent ripples through the Vakesh systems, their movements becoming erratic, less coordinated. "Nice work," Jonas said, lobbing his improvised grenade. It exploded with a satisfying thud, and for a moment silence reigned. "You know," Mira said, pausing to catch her breath, "I'm starting to think we might actually live through this." "Don't jinx it," Carter replied, though he couldn't hide the flicker of hope in his eyes. "We're not out of the woods yet." The Vakesh, realizing their advantage was slipping, redoubled their efforts, but the humans had found a rhythm. Their defiance was infectious, a virus spreading through the air, infecting every heart with the belief that maybe, just maybe, they could win. Harker's mind raced, juggling strategies and tactics, each move calculated but risky. It was all or nothing now. Every decision bore the weight of potential disaster, but standing still wasn't an option. "Keep the pressure on," she commanded, her voice steady. "We can't let them regroup." The portal hummed louder, a promise of chaos and salvation intertwined. Finlay's eyes darted between his work and the battlefield, his brain a maelstrom of possibilities. "If we can destabilize their systems, it might cause a feedback loop," he said, hope mingling with madness. "It could disrupt their whole operation. Or blow us all to hell," Jonas added, ever the realist. "Details," Finlay replied with a grin that bordered on lunacy. The Vakesh pressed harder, fury and desperation etched into their monstrous faces. They were used to victory, to subjugation, not this stubborn resistance. But the humans held fast, their resolve as unyielding as the cold metal walls that surrounded them. Amidst the chaos, General Viraxal bellowed orders, trying to regain control, but the Vakesh were faltering, their rhythm broken. It was a dance of death, and for once the humans were leading. In a moment of clarity, Harker saw the path forward. "Finlay," she said, her voice cutting through the noise, "do it. Whatever you've got, do it now." Finlay hesitated, the weight of the decision hanging heavy, but there was no time for doubt. He took a deep breath, fingers poised like a maestro about to conduct his magnum opus, and initiated the sequence. There was a moment of stillness, a breath held in the collective chest of the universe, and then the portal surged with energy, a torrent of light and sound that crackled through the air like a thunderstorm in a bottle. The Vakesh soldiers faltered, their systems thrown into disarray, weapons glitching, movement stuttering. It was chaos, but this time it was on the humans' terms. Harker and her team pushed forward, momentum carrying them like a wave crashing upon the shore. They drove the Vakesh back, step by step, inch by inch, reclaiming ground with each heartbeat. The battle raged, a symphony of chaos and determination, but for the first time it felt like the melody was changing. The humans, with their backs against the wall, were finding their footing, and the Vakesh were learning what it meant to be outmatched, not by technology or numbers, but by sheer, unrelenting will. "Keep it up," Harker shouted, her voice a rallying cry that echoed through the corridors. We can end this. As the tide turned, the team fought with renewed vigor, each blow a testament to their resilience, each victory a step closer to survival. The portal, now a beacon of hope rather than doom, pulsed with energy, a reminder that even in the darkest hour, there was a chance for light. The Vakesh, once unstoppable, were now the ones retreating, their confidence shattered by the indomitable spirit of the humans they had underestimated. It was a reversal of fortune that left General Virixal seething, his plans unraveling like a cheap suit in a rainstorm. With the balance shifting, the team pressed their advantage, driving the Vakesh back toward the portal, a tide of human defiance sweeping them along. The base, once on the brink of collapse, was now a fortress of hope, its defenders resolute in their purpose. "You know," Mira said, pausing to catch her breath, a smile tugging at her lips, "I think we might actually pull this off." "Don't count your chickens," Jonas replied, though even he couldn't suppress the grin spreading across his face. "But yeah, I think we just might." As the Vakesh faltered, the humans surged, their victory not yet assured but tantalizingly within reach. The battle was far from over, but for the first time it felt like they had a fighting chance. A chance to defy fate and prove that humanity, for all its flaws, was a force to be reckoned with. And as the portal shimmered with potential, a gateway to both danger and salvation, Harker couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, they had found the glimmer of hope they so desperately needed. The base had seen better days, back when it was less of a war zone and more of a bureaucratic nightmare sporting blinking lights and beeping consoles. Now, everything was tilted at odd angles, like the universe's attempt at modern art. Dr. Sylvain Harker crouched behind one such overturned console, punching calculations into a terminal that was only slightly less temperamental than her ex-husband. "Hey, Harker," Carter shouted over the din, reloading his gun with the nonchalance of someone restocking snacks. "Next time, let's build a base in a swamp. At least then the smell would match the situation." "Noted," Harker replied, barely glancing up. "I'll add it to our post-apocalyptic improvement suggestions." Shots ricocheted off the walls, making Mira duck, her expression a mix of exhaustion and irritation, like she'd been asked to work another double shift without overtime. "Finlay, any day now with that genius plan of yours," she hollered, dodging an energy bolt that missed her head by a disappointingly small margin. "I'm on it," Finlay Mistral replied, his hands a blur as he fiddled with the alien tech interface. "You can't rush brilliance, you know, especially when brilliance is cobbled together from alien leftovers." Jonas, tinkering with what looked disturbingly like a coffee maker but was definitely not making coffee, glanced over. "Just make sure whatever you're doing doesn't end with us as charred art exhibits." Ah, Jonas, ever the optimist. He gave his makeshift grenade a final tweak, then lobbed it over the barricade. It exploded with the satisfying boom of a victory dance in a war zone disco. General Virixal, perched at the back of the Vakesh troops, watched the chaos unfold with a face that screamed corporate restructuring. His alien minions were in disarray, their normally slick proceedings turned into a bad slapstick skit by Finlay's relentless tinkering. "Push harder, fools," Virixal snarled, his patience thinner than an intern's paycheck, but the Vakesh were faltering. They weren't used to this level of resistance or sarcasm. Finlay finally straightened, a manic gleam in his eyes. "Okay, I've got something that should really mess with their systems. Not perfect, but it'll do the trick." "Perfect isn't in the cards today," Carter said, firing off another volley. "Just give us something that doesn't backfire." Backfire, you guys are too much," Finlay chuckled, though the humor was lost in the hail of gunfire. With a deft twist, Finlay triggered the sequence. Alien consoles spat sparks and whined like a toddler denied screen time. The Vakesh soldiers staggered, their synchronization going the way of polite political discourse. "Now's our chance," Harker shouted, adrenaline lending her voice a commanding edge. "Push them back into the portal." The team surged forward, each step met with resistance but also a tangible spark of hope. The Vakesh, unprepared for a comeback of this magnitude, reeled from the sudden offensive. General Virixal's booming commands were lost in the melee, his control unraveling faster than a reality TV star's career. Mira dodged and weaved through the chaos, her movements a blur of defiance. "You know, I was expecting a crappy day, but this is really setting a new standard." "Glad to see your bar was low," Jonas quipped, tossing another explosive surprise into the fray. "Mine was on the floor and we're still not clearing it." The portal, that temperamental beast, fluctuated wildly, its energy unpredictable and untamed, a cosmic cat having a meltdown. It was Earth's door to another world, but right now it was their best bet at shutting down the Vakish invasion. "Finlay, can you close it?" Harker asked, knowing full well that asking Finlay for anything was like flipping a coin with two tails. "Working on it," Finlay replied, fingers darting over controls with manic energy. "Could use a little more time, though." "Time's not exactly on tap," Carter pointed out, ducking under a volley of plasma shots. "Time, space, sanity. None of those things are in great supply right now," Mira added, kicking a Vakish grunt back through the swirling chaos of the portal. The Vakish were now as frantic as a pack of cats at a dog show. Their tech, once a seamless blend of function and terror, was now a series of unfortunate events thanks to Finlay's meddling. "Keep them off balance," Harker ordered. "Finlay, do whatever it takes to get that portal closed." Finlay was already on it, muttering to himself like a mad scientist whose experiment had just gone spectacularly wrong, or right, depending on your perspective. Okay, just a few more tweaks." And there, with one last flourish, he enacted the closure sequence. The portal responded with a roar, its energy spiraling inward. The Vakish, caught off guard, found themselves scrambling to avoid being pulled into the very breach they had created. "Fall back," Virixal bellowed, his authority cracking like a brittle icicle in a thaw. But it was too late. The humans, driven by desperation and grit, pushed the Vakish back with renewed vigor. Jonas, a self-satisfied grin on his face, watched as the remaining Vakish were sucked toward the portal. "Looks like we're closing early today, folks," Carter chuckled, despite it all. "Just another day at the office." As the portal's energy began to stabilize and close, Mira turned to Harker with a look that could have melted titanium. "You know, I really didn't think we'd manage this." "To be honest," Harker replied, her relief palpable, "neither did I. But here we are, defying the odds and all that." Virixal, realizing his situation had gone from bad to "your mother-in-law's here for a week," attempted one last rally. But his troops were too scattered, their morale shattered. In a final act of desperation, he charged toward the portal, hoping to regroup on the other side. "Not so fast," Carter shouted, tackling Virixal with all the grace of a wrecking ball through a china shop. The two grappled, a chaotic dance of punches and snarls, until finally Carter got the upper hand, pinning the Vakish general to the ground. "Got him," Carter called, wiping the sweat and alien goop from his brow. "Now what?" Harker looked around, assessing the damage, the victory, the cost. The base was in ruins, but they'd done it. They'd repelled the Vakish, at least for now. "We hold him," she decided, "and figure out what he knows. Might help us prepare for whatever comes next." "Great," Finlay said, flopping down beside a smoldering console with a tired grin. "I hear alien generals make great conversation over tea." The team gathered, battered but not broken, around Carter and the captured Virixal. The portal, now a subdued echo of its former self, sealed shut with a finality that felt like the end of a bad movie sequel. "Nice work, everyone," Jonas said, his voice tinged with the weary satisfaction of someone who'd just survived another day of insanity. "I don't know about you, but I'm ready for a long nap." "Join the club," Mira agreed, her usual skepticism softened by the glow of triumph. "Same time next week." "God, I hope not," Carter replied, though the camaraderie in his tone suggested he wouldn't entirely mind. "But if so, at least we'll be ready." General Virixal, finding himself in the unenviable position of a captive in a very human drama, glared at his captors with a disdain that could have peeled paint. "You think you've won? This is but a minor setback." Yeah, Jonas waved, unimpressed. "Heard it all before, buddy, but today we win, and tomorrow—" "Well, let's just see how bad your snores are, shall we?" As the dust settled and the adrenaline wore off, the team stood amidst the wreckage of the base. The battle had been won, but the war, if that's what it was, loomed large in their minds. They'd bought themselves time, secured a small victory, but the future was as uncertain as it had ever been. Still, for now, there was a sense of accomplishment, the kind that comes from sticking it to the man, or in this case, the lizard. The Vakesh had underestimated humanity, taken their resilience for granted. That wouldn't be a mistake they'd make twice. Harker surveyed the scene, her eyes lingering on her team, the ragtag group of misfits who'd pulled off the impossible. They were tired, bruised, more than a little worse for wear, but they were alive, and they'd done it together. "Let's get to work on fortifying this place," she said finally, the order more of a suggestion, a gentle nudge back to reality. "We've got some breathing room now. Let's use it wisely." And with that they began the slow task of rebuilding, patching up old wounds, preparing for whatever came next. Because in this universe, survival wasn't just about winning battles. It was about being ready for the next one. And maybe, just maybe, they'd get a breather before the universe threw the next curveball their way. But if not, well, they'd show up all the same, ready to fight, ready to survive. After all, it was just another Tuesday. The aftermath of a battlefield has a certain charm, like the morning after a heavy night out. You're not quite sure what happened, but you're alive, and that's something. Earth's research base, once a hub of bureaucratic tedium, now had all the appeal of a scrapyard post-tornado. It was a mess, sure, but it was their mess, and they'd earned it. Dr. Sylvain Harker looked around at the devastation. Each overturned console and smoldering heap a testament to their impromptu victory. "Well, at least now we know this place can take a beating," she muttered. Stepping over the charred remains of a Vakesh trooper like it was a discarded fast food wrapper. Mira, sweating and smudged with the grime of battle, gave a wry smile. "If I ever complain about a dull day again, someone slap me." "Gladly," Carter replied, rubbing his shoulder where the latest in a series of bruises was already forming. "Just let me know when you're ready for your next dose of reality." Finlay Mistral was already elbow-deep in wires and circuits, the look of a mad scientist glued to his face. "You know, for alien tech, this stuff is surprisingly user-unfriendly. It's like they designed it with a manual that's only available in sarcasm." Spoken like a man who's never seen a government-issued user guide, Jonas chimed in, still tinkering with his grenade-cum-coffee maker. "If it doesn't explode on startup, it's a win." "Right," Harker said, rallying the troops. "We need to get this place back online. Those Vakesh lizards will be back and they'll be pissed." "Nothing like a warm welcome from our interdimensional neighbors," Mira quipped, stifling a yawn with the back of her hand. "Who knew first contact would come with so much paperwork?" Carter gave a dry laugh, devoid of any real humor. "I'd kill for some paperwork right now. At least you can set it on fire for warmth." As they surveyed the wreckage, Jonas glanced back at the subdued portal. "Think they'll try that again?" "Probably," Harker said, shrugging. "The Vakesh aren't known for their sunny dispositions." "And Virixal back there." She gestured to where the captured alien general sat, looking more like an annoyed cat than a defeated commander, "isn't exactly going to win any awards for diplomacy." Finlay tapped away at an alien console, grimacing as he worked. "Well, at least next time we can tell them we're not interested in their magazine subscriptions." Virixal, looking about as pleased as a cat in a bath, growled low in his throat. "You humans think this is a victory. We will return, stronger and more prepared." "Save the monologue, Shakespeare," Carter said, tightening the makeshift restraints they'd cobbled together from what was left of the base. "We're not in the mood for dramatics." The team continued their work, each member hyper-focused in their tasks but still aware of the shared silence that had settled over them. The kind of silence that follows a near-death experience, where everyone is too relieved to be alive to dwell on how close they came to not being. "Okay, folks," Harker clapped her hands, trying to inject some energy into the room. "Let's see what we've got to work with." Finlay, always one to rise to the occasion, grinned like a kid in a candy store. "We can patch the main systems from here, reroute some power from the secondary generators. Might not be pretty, but it'll work, like a bandage on a bad haircut." "Function over form," Jonas said, testing the weight of his latest contraption. "That's the engineering way. Or the lazy way," Mira added, tossing spare parts into a growing pile. As they worked, the conversation turned, as it always did, to the endless cycle of threats and survival. It was the kind of philosophical debate best suited to a bar, but they made do with the rubble. "You ever wonder," Carter mused, "if maybe we're the bad guys?" Jonas snorted. "You mean like in a cosmic sense?" "Yeah. We're the uninvited guests in their universe after all." "True," Finlay said, crossing his arms as he paused to think. "But anyone who tries to kill me on sight is automatically on my bad guy list. Saves time." Mira nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Besides, if we're the baddies, we're the most underfunded and poorly organized villains ever." Harker paused, considering. "Maybe, but then again, we're also the most determined. And possibly insane, given how many times we've beaten the odds." "Call it what you want," Carter said, a hint of weariness in his voice. "But as long as we're breathing, they're gonna know we're here." They worked in a comfortable silence for a while, punctuated only by the clatter of makeshift repairs and the occasional muttered curse when something didn't go quite right. It had been a long day, and the promise of more to come was a weight they all felt. "So," Jonas said, breaking the quiet, "what's the plan if they do come back?" "That's simple," Harker replied. "We hit them harder and faster, make sure they know Earth isn't a free-for-all buffet." "And in the meantime?" Mira asked, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. "What about all those lovely parallel universes out there? We leave them alone," Carter said firmly. "If they are anything like this one, it's best we give them some space." "Space," Finlay chuckled. "Isn't that what got us into this mess?" "More like a lack of it," Jonas replied, adjusting his gadgetry. "But who needs peace and quiet when you've got interdimensional wars, right?" The team shared a laugh, the kind that comes from shared hardship and the relief of having made it through another day. It was grim, maybe, but it was theirs. "So," Harker said, looking around at her team, "shall we get this place looking like something other than a war zone?" "Can't make it any worse," Mira said, heading for the nearest pile of debris. "Careful," Carter warned. "That's what they said about the Titanic." "Yeah, but look how famous it got. Maybe we'll get a movie deal out of this," Finlay joked, his hands now deep in the guts of a second console, pulling wires like a magician with an endless scarf. "Only if they cast someone handsome to play me," Jonas added with a wink. "I've got a reputation to maintain." The team set to work, finding a rhythm amidst the chaos, each focused on the task at hand, repairing, rebuilding, preparing for whatever came next. There was a certain peace in it, a quiet acceptance of their lot in this peculiar corner of the universe. As they labored, a sense of camaraderie settled over them, tempered by the knowledge that they'd faced something monumental and come out the other side. It was a victory, however fleeting, and they'd take it. Mira, breaking the silence once more, said, "You know, if we get through this, I'm going on a real vacation." "None of this saving the world nonsense." "You mean you don't find alien invasions relaxing?" Carter quipped, nudging her playfully as they worked side by side. "Not nearly enough beach cocktails," she replied, chuckling. "Though the screaming does have its own charm." The hours passed in a blur of sweat and determination, the base slowly transforming from a disaster zone back into a functional, if somewhat ragged, research station. It was far from perfect, but it was their home away from home, against all odds. Eventually, as the last light of the day began to fade, they paused, surveying their handiwork. It wasn't pretty, but it was a start. "Think it'll hold?" Jonas asked, tossing a spanner into an open toolbox with a satisfying clunk. It'll have to, Harker said, nodding with a confidence she wasn't entirely sure she felt. We've done all we can for now. And tomorrow, Finlay queried, wiping grease-stained hands on his already filthy jumpsuit. Tomorrow, we do it all over again, Carter said, a tired but determined edge to his voice. Because we've got this far and I'm not about to let some overgrown lizards ruin our streak, Mira sighed, leaning against a stack of crates. Right, so no rest for the wicked or the slightly unhinged. The group shared another laugh, a sound of shared relief and defiance. It was the end of one battle in the long war, but they were still standing, still fighting. And that was something. As they prepared to bunker down for the night, Virixal, still bound and glaring, spoke up. You humans are fools if you think this is over. Maybe, Harker said, her tone dismissive, but we're fools who are still here. That must count for something. Yeah, Carter added, besides, ever heard of Stockholm Syndrome? Stick around long enough, you might like us. Virixal huffed but remained silent, a small victory in itself. With that, the team settled down to rest, letting the weariness of the day catch up with them. It had been a long, brutal fight, but they were alive, if not kicking, then at least twitching. As Harker lay back against a makeshift pillow, a pile of old uniforms that smelled vaguely of sweat and desperation, she felt a flicker of hope amid the exhaustion. They'd survived, they'd fought back, and they'd shown the Vakesh that Earth wasn't just a collection of easy marks. They were resilient, determined, and more than a little stubborn, traits that might just see them through whatever came next. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, and no doubt, new headaches. But for now, they had a moment to breathe, to regroup, to plan. And maybe, just maybe, they'd finally get a moment's peace before the universe decided to test their patience once again. But even if it didn't, she knew they'd meet it with the same irreverent determination that had carried them this far. Because this was humanity, flawed, sarcastic, and unyielding. And that, Harker thought as she drifted off into a dreamless sleep, was enough for now.